In this video, we'll walk you through how to look at a design in Figma and train your eye to see that a web page is simply a big block of content with lots of smaller boxes inside of it. Once you've trained your eyes to see a web page like that, a design like that, it will be much easier and much faster for you to integrate that design into WeWeb or any other tool for that matter. It is a best practice that we recommend you follow to actually design in a separate tool like Figma and then integrate the design in WeWeb. If you try to do both things at the same time, it would be like if you were recording a song at the same time as you're writing it. It wouldn't, they're two separate processes. It wouldn't work. It doesn't work very well. So it's much easier to take the time to put together a design, whether it's in Figma or any other tool, but to take the time to think about your user experience, what they need to see on the page, where they need to see it, and then in the later stage to actually build the page in WeWeb. Unless you really don't care about the design, you really, if you're very experienced as a UX person, for example, and you know exactly where to put your navbar and your menus and all of that and the different blocks, and you just want to build a proof of concept very, very fast without any design elements, then that's fine. You could build directly in WeWeb, but it's not, we don't recommend it unless you're very experienced at it, basically. Okay, now let's look at the client portal that our designer prepared for us. What we have here is we see a top navigation menu, very simple with a logo and a profile link. And then we see this, which is like a big block of content. When we look at the block of content, we see there's some spacing at the top and on the left and on the right. And we see this, it's fairly obvious for us that there's like this big, like lots of content here and void space here, basically. So the first errors we can make when integrating this design into WeWeb is to not deal with these spaces properly. The first idea we might have would be to add margins in pixels or percentages. Adding margins and percentages is not a good idea because it can cause problems on big screens, especially with tables. So it's rarely the best option. If we go in WeWeb here, so for this section, we set margins as at 5%. If we go into preview mode, and we play around with this, we start making this content bigger, so on a much wider screen, we see suddenly that our design is no longer well balanced. So the table here, suddenly there's like too much spacing between columns, and our entire design just looks kind of flat. The other option would be to add padding. It's a little bit better, but we're going to have a similar issue as we did with the margins. So let's have a look in here. We're looking at the padding. And again, so here we only changed, we put a padding at 5%. And we see there's still an issue with the table. And our design still looks pretty unbalanced. So what do? So we recommend adding a max width to your section with a little bit of padding on your elements so that on small screens, the content still has a little bit of breathing room. Let's have a look at what that would look like in WeWeb. Here in this example, what we've done is we've added a max width of 1300 pixels. By default, when you add a blank section, it will have a max width of full. And you see here, we only have padding, and it's what we talked about earlier. Our table doesn't look very good and are on a big screen, and the design loses a bit of its balance. So we'll go ahead and box the section at a max width of 1300 pixels. Now, the cool thing is that when our design still looks very balanced. On very big screens, you will have spacing. And by the way, you can change that a little bit if you prefer. You could make it a bit bigger. We like 1300. We think it works well in most use cases, so that's what we recommend. But feel free to experiment a little bit. Now, if we made the screens smaller, we still want the content to have that breathing room. So that's why we added some padding here with fixed pixels. And to make it responsive as well, we changed the padding a little bit on mobile. So the padding is smaller on mobile, but you see that it still works. There's still some breathing room on our design. So you get the idea. A max width with a little bit of padding will ensure that your design looks good and balanced on large screens, thanks to the max width, and also on small screens, thanks to the padding. Okay, let's go back to our big block of content to train our eyes to view the different blocks on the page. So we already said that we had this navbar, this navigation menu, and we said that we had a big block of content. Now, how can we actually think about that big block of content? One method is to start from the top left, go right, and then top to bottom. So if we look at our design here, we'll train our eyes from the top left, and it may be that you need to design from right to left, and you can adapt this method. This is just one method that we're proposing, but you can adapt it to suit your needs, of course. But let's say we're starting from left to right. So what we want to do is we want to train our eye to go from left to right and notice when it finds an obstacle. So here is an obstacle. So this thing here, this month, this select is a different block from this text here. But if we go here, suddenly we see some space and we notice that top to bottom, if we try to go from the top to the bottom, our eye manages to go right through the page. So we're able here to go all the way from the top to the bottom without any obstacles. And what that tells us is that there's a block of content on the left and a block of content on the right. We have two columns. We have this column 1 and this column 2. Now, inside each of these boxes, there are also other boxes. So for example, in column 1, we have a box, which is our header, another box, which is the overview, and another box, which is, we'll call history. And on the right here, we have a box, which is a card, and then another box, which are links. If we go back to a clean view of our design, we can look at how we managed to decompose this page into multiple boxes. So here we said that from left to right, we stopped here because that's where I was able to go from top to bottom without interruption. And we said as well that there was a big space here, so which suggested that this was a different block of content from this. And if we go top to bottom, we notice here that, boom, there's a bit of space here, and there's even a border. So that suggests that this entire thing is a different block of content from this. The idea is to really train your eye to see spaces and borders. When you see a border, that's a pretty clear sign that it's a different box. And when you see space, it's also a sign if the spaces feels bigger, feels larger than the inherent space you have here between those two text elements, then that's also a sign that you have different boxes. So let's have a look at this section here, at our header. We've already established that there's a box on the left and a box on the right. Now, if we look at the box on the left, we can actually see that there are two vertical items. There are two text elements within that box. The notion of vertical and horizontal is important because when we integrate the design in WeWeb, we'll use flexboxes with a horizontal or vertical direction to display the elements next to each other, horizontal, or stack them on top of each other, vertical. But we'll talk more about that later when we spend some time actually building this design in WeWeb. The idea is that when there's only one direction between my elements, we know that there's only one box. So let's actually have a look at the overview section now. We see here again, there's like a left and right separation, like two boxes. And then inside that left box, we see there are two boxes on top of each other where it says current month and where it says it has the minutes, the duration. And in this second box, we have three horizontal items. So this is an icon. This is one text element with a specific type of style and another text element with a specific type of style. So those three horizontal items, because they're on that same line and that same direction, we know that it's one block. So it's one block with three elements. Finally, let's have a look at the history block. So we have a header, we have filters, and we have a table. And those are three blocks inside of that history block that we identified before. We notice that those three blocks stack up on top of each other. So the direction of the history box is vertical. It may seem a bit strange that we're spending so much time thinking about boxes and blocks of content and elements, but it will really help us speed things along once we start building our page in WeWeb. So all those boxes that we saw in Figma, those are actually HTML elements on the page. And because we've trained our eye to identify them, we can easily drag and drop elements on the page now and rename them and start styling them. This will make it much easier to build a page that looks good. So, to summarize, two things. One, it's best practice to create your design separately before you start building a page in WeWeb. And second, it's good to train the eye to view boxes that make up a web page. One method of doing this is to start from the top left and go all the way to the right and then to the bottom. Try to go top to bottom and perceive whenever you see obstacles like borders or spaces that are a bit bigger than that might be signaling that you're dealing with a different box on the page. Now it's time to build and learn more about CSS styling properties and how you can build your page in WeWeb.